Thank you so much, everyone. I can see people streaming in. And thank you for everyone who's taken the time to join our virtual event. My name is Vincent Mwangi. I am the head of partnerships and programs at Mama Hope. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. And as we let our participants to join, because I'm pretty sure we're joining from all over the world, I'd like to start by reading some statements that's to keep us grounded. So before we start this discussion, the team at Mama Hope and the panelists would like to acknowledge what is happening around the world, from climate-related disasters to war and social economic strife across several continents. We have the privilege of creating a space to host important conversations, and we can do this only because we have the agency, something no one should take for granted. Therefore, the task we all have is to use the privilege we've been given in the best we can as we work towards making the world a better place. At Mama Hope, we are guided by our values of love, partnership, integrity, and transformation in how we treat each other. And we'd like to extend that here in this conversation and beyond. Today, we are joined by some of our great friends at Mama Hope, and I'd like to take this opportunity to have each one of them say hi before we jump into the conversation. So for our panelists, you can say your name, where you're joining us from, and the organization you're representing.
So hello all. My name is Tom Henry. I'm connecting today from Denver, Colorado, where we have snow for all of the folks on the continent who are missing winter. It's definitely arrived here in North America. And I'm a practitioner.
Hi, everyone. I'll go next. I'm Karen Lambert, joining today from Burlington, Vermont. I'm a practitioner in the humanitarian peace development sector. And thank you for Mama Hope for hosting today.
Great. Hello, everyone. Good to be here with you. My name is John Rexford Nzira, and I'm a leader in the nonprofit world, but also with experience in social entrepreneurship and social enterprises. And I'm here to have a great conversation with you guys. Back to you, Vinny.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll take this moment because we'd like to know the kind of participants or the areas that our participants are representing. And if you can see on your screen, we're going to be running a short survey where you are able, you can, it's a multiple choice poll where you select the sector that you're representing so that we can be able to shape our conversations and also be able to know the kind of participants or representation that we have with us today. So Wamboy, if you can run the poll, and you can select the areas that you're representing today. So we're going to jump into our conversation, and to have to engage our panelists. One of the things that a common thread with all our panelists here today is that you have all worked with or are working directly with communities and social entrepreneurs. And so to start us off, we'd like to know what is your motivation to working in this sector, or what has been your interest in joining this sector? I think to start us, John, maybe you can start us with that.
Yes, I have so many interests in what I'm doing, especially leading a nonprofit like ourselves, leading a team of people that serves people who are first hard to reach, hard to find, and also sometimes it might be even hard to fund. And why I'm passionate about serving this community of people is that there are not enough role players in such communities supporting grassroots, where voices need to be heard, impact needs to be amplified, work needs to be seen. So one of the things that I'm passionate about is the fact that, yes, apart from the fact that there are few people or role players in the ecosystem that address grassroots, it's also a passion working with first-hand information, first-hand innovators, first-hand change makers, people who do things out of passion rather than seeing things from afar, seeing a trend. These are the people that I'm really interested to work with and also serve and find different ways on how we could also open opportunities for such people. So yes, I could love challenges. I love going to remote areas. Now I'm speaking from an area where it's very far, miles away from where I'm living, but it's also all in the name of finding grassroots. So that's why I'm interested. It's also adventurous in one way or the other. Thank you so much, and back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, John, for that great points, the great points and starting us off. I think one of the things I really enjoy too is like our partner visits and just being in the field and being able to connect with different people who are serving their communities. And so I'd like Karen to tell us her motivation and what brings her into this sector.
Sure, thank you. I started in the sector working domestically in the United States, working in conflict resolution in the city of Chicago, motivated mostly by connecting with people within the city and maybe sharing with them skills and opportunities in order to enhance their lives and make it easier and better with solving conflict. And then as my children were growing, I was thinking more about globally what kind of world I wanted them to live in. So transitioned over to the international sector, working primarily in East Africa and Somalia and Sudan. What I love most about being in the sector is my colleagues and coworkers and the passion that they bring to wanting to embrace the differences and the commonalities that connect all of us. People who are willing to leave their comfort zone to work and to learn from others and learn not just impart knowledge, but learn from locals how to build resilience and solve problems. And then the motivation of thinking how collectively we're responsible for each other, not just what's happening geographically from our country of origin or the place where we happen to live. So both as the practitioners I've met, my colleagues, and also people who are interested in philanthropy, I find that that's the connection from the heart and from the mind of what people care about makes me want to go to work and want to engage in conversations every day.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think one of the things I feel I have in common with you, Karen, is that I've also worked in peacekeeping and development previously. And I can attest that especially in our region, which is called the Horn of Africa, there's much needed interventions when it comes to such conversations. And thank you for joining us and bringing in that perspective, especially around that area. And then finally, for the introductions, I'd have you, Tom, just tell us what your motivation is and yeah.
Thank you, Vinny. I'd say my motivation is sort of at the global scale, the whole notion that there's a system in place and I'm trying to disrupt that system, whether you believe it's the global north and the fact that power is held in certain areas and then its ideas and strategies are probably imposed, but probably meant in a helpful or constructive way. But I think having worked now for 18 years in various nonprofit boards, starting in Cape Town with Children's Radio Project, and then across Village Health Works in Burundi, meeting folks who have lived on the continent, and then most recently with President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's foundation in Monrovia, and understanding how governance, public service, policy influences opportunities. I've returned to my original roots before getting into resource mobilization, which is entrepreneurship and innovation. And what I'm struck by is how young the continent is. One of the youngest populations, I believe it is the youngest population, and working on ways to unlock the potential of these young people. As I'm reminded by the teams I work with now, primarily in UNHCR refugee camps, you're only young once, and if you miss that window. So I really focus on young innovators and entrepreneurs, and also shifting power to bring it to placing that power back in the hands of the people that know best. So thanks for this opportunity.
Yeah, and thank you so much. And I'd also like to urge our participants to, the chat box is open. So if possible, kindly engage us or just shout out the organization you're representing and the country where you're calling in from, so that we can be able to see or we can be able to get to know where everyone is. And so I'll go back to John. Currently, the global development sector, there are different talks that have been happening, especially around localization. There's also shift the power, and we've seen so many stakeholders within the sector call for the change and reforms within the sector. But one of the things that at Mama Hope we've also experienced working with locally led organizations for the 15 years of existence we've been in this sector. We've seen how difficult it is for organizations such as you in terms of like mobilizing resources for your communities. And so we'd like to hear from you, what are some of the barriers, that proximate leaders such as you, what do you experience when you're trying to mobilize resources for your community?
Great, thank you so much. Allow me to give everyone a little bit of context of exactly what we do and what I do and the people that we serve. And the first one would be, what I do is and somehow serve grassroots. I do this with Twende. What Twende does is to empower people to co-create technological solutions that would benefit the communities that are meant for that specific technology. This, in turn, is there to support the local innovations to grow into scalable businesses or social enterprises or ventures that would help both the community and the innovator themselves. And that's one. And the other thing is the fact that we work with grassroots. We go to communities where their basic need would be, perhaps they even don't have any electricity or even don't have internet connection. Their basic work would be to simplify how they farm, to simplify how they rear their livestock. Or if it's perhaps a mining community, how would they mine better with the little resources that they have? So that's where we find them, and we now help them think of solutions that will help them to make their work better, but also generate income and also improve their livelihoods. So the biggest challenge that I've seen with the resources and access to resources is because, first of all, it might be hard. There's a huge gap. There's a huge gap between the people with the resources and the ones who need these resources. So there are a lot of levels to that. First of all, the first person who is, let's say, it could be an investor with an investee. There are lots of layers in between that might make it even hard for them to connect and get to know each other. The community I work with, I must say also language might be a challenge with the ones that I work with, but it's not a bigger challenge because in general, it helps. The work that they're doing is really, really impactful and is seen. Apart from that, distance between the ones with the resources and the ones who don't have resources is now how to bridge that gap, the technology that's used. Someone could be, we could have an investor, let's say from Nairobi, or someone who would like to fund such initiatives of these grassroots, and the other person is in Njombe where there's no electricity, no access to internet. How do they meet? How does this person see this? Or there's an opportunity from someone who posted it in Los Angeles. There's an opportunity from Cape Town. They can't see that. So technology also poses as a bigger challenge there, especially on connectivity. So when it comes to resources, there's a huge gap, both distance-wise, both technological-wise, and there are times it might affect how trust happens between these people. These are the communities, these are the people that you're not aware of, you're not so much used to. This is someone who tells you, oh, I have this solution and it could help this big community in a number of ways, but it's hard to trust such a person because it might be hard to see what they're doing in essence. So basically, I would say that there are many reasons, and I've seen those are the commonalities that I see that affect the general public, especially when it comes to accessing resources. But there are many, many other reasons. Others could be very important, especially to an individual. But for now, allow me to share those.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I'll really emphasize on what you've said around trust. It's one thing that we've seen, it's quite a huge thing. And especially around resource allocation and how these communities are trusted with resources, especially by investors and donors. And going on next to our conversation, I'm going to go to, I'll have Karen point out what did you see was the role of locally led organizations and community members in creating healthy and thriving communities from your previous experience in humanitarian and peace action? And this is because one of the things, and if you see us or referring to these local leaders as proximate leaders, is because we've seen how they are able to channel resources direct to their communities, and they also know where needs lie. And so there's that proximity when it comes to utilization of resources. And so based on your experience, Karen, and I'm pretty sure you've seen these working in this sector, what did you see was the role of locally led organizations in creating healthy and thriving communities?
Sure, thanks, Vinny. Just to go back to the question before, one other barrier that I've seen is even after we've raised awareness about a problem and built trust and shown engagement, that there's sometimes a barrier just with like the fiscal transfer of resources. So if a small locally led organization in East Africa doesn't have a fiscal sponsor in the US, then there's a barrier. Even if you have donors who are interested in supporting or investing in the organization, then you have to find a fiscal sponsor because of just the transfer of resources through the banking system and the barriers, which is possibly based on, Western ideas of exploitation and corruption, and some of the decolonization of wealth issues, that if the money were more centrally located, perhaps in coming from a bank in Nairobi and not a bank in New York City, then there might be less barriers and more trust just among the institutions. So just about the resource barrier question, that's another point to make. But in terms of locally led organizations, I know later we're going to talk about trust in more depth, but it is the locals who understand the resources that are available in terms of the conversations and the relationships and how people make their livelihoods and the resilience factors that are already in place. And those have to, in order to be fully access all the capacities that are available, there needs to be long-term relationships that exist. For example, in our Sudan work several years ago with a different non-for-profit, we were working with local community leaders and civil society organizations for years before Omar al-Bashir fell, because they needed to have the ability to have, to know what their voice is, to be able to engage in inclusive dialogue processes, and to understand how diplomatic conversations would work in preparation for when the inevitable moment would come when the dictatorship left. But it was not everyone, when we were looking for resources to fund that work before, not everyone had the insight to see that the dictatorship would eventually fall, and that we needed to be working with, women, youth, religious leaders, all the touch points in the community to be prepared for that time, because it's not as exciting or as sexy for the investors to believe in, because you're working for something that you hope will happen, and you may have the conviction that that's where the future of the direction of the country is going, but not everyone on the outside sees that. So that was always a huge barrier for us.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Karen, for that. And I'm going to mirror your experiences with what we've also seen at Mama Hope. I'll give a scenario of during COVID-19, because since Mama Hope was founded, as I said earlier, we've always believed in the expertise of these communities that we work with. And for the years that we've been working, we've been supporting communities in building the systems in place that enable them to be resilient. And one of the things that we do this first of all through income generating projects, whereby we support locally led organizations set up social businesses in a way that they're able to generate revenue from local resources, because we've also come to realize there's huge capital within these communities, and we've also realized there's job creation. And so one interesting thing that we saw during COVID-19 is that majority of locally led organizations are really struggling, because first of all, they always over-relied on outside support, first of all, especially like, for instance, when it comes to certain leadership, it might be centered around the foreign staff members who also come into communities as implementers. But then when the pandemic hit, there was a huge exodus, especially for people going back to their countries, and much of these locally led organizations were left stranded. But then one interesting thing with us as an organization is that we realized, because of we had always had communities at the center of their decision-making processes and setting their own development agenda, we had I'd say an over 90% success rate in terms of like resilience within communities, because partner projects kept on going, they continued, they never stopped. So I really agree with you, especially when it comes to community resilience and supporting them in building such systems. I think we did have a question here, but then I think maybe we can come back later. And one of it was for John. But then I think let's, first of all, or John, are you going to answer as we prepare to have Tom next? So Jennifer says, John, appreciate the theme of building trust and connection. Do people you are supporting sometimes have access to cell phones to connect via SMS text?
Yes, so that I don't take Tom's time, yes, I'll just be very brief. Most of them do have that, but it might not be to everyone. The ones who can access, yes, they do have cell phones. I don't have the statistics. It's quite high. It's quite high, the number of people that are connected, but the connectivity I'm talking about is the consistency, first of all. Then secondly, it's the access to things like internet, which might be, to some people, it's a basic need, but to some others, it's a luxury, especially now people, the grassroots and people in the communities that we serve, and these are the majority. To them, it's a luxury. And their tools, learning tools to access, that might be online, might not be very friendly to them. They have to upgrade big time for them to have access to such tools. So if I'm to respond briefly, that's it for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then Tom, you've had quite a wide experience when it comes to like fundraising, and one of the things that we'd like to hear from you, what do you think are some of the big shifts to impact investing and investing in local initiative that from traditional philanthropy?
Thanks, Vinny. I would say that impact investing should be viewed as additional to the work of the nonprofit and the philanthropic community. 1 billion people, there's plenty of opportunity to help. And so I would want to make it clear to the audience and anyone interested in that it should be complementary, and it should be aligned to the extent possible to improve efficiency, but in no way is it meant to disintermediate or take out any of the activities that are going on there now. And as John said, there are many layers in the current system, and I look at the layers as being ways to mitigate risk. And so I've started at the other end, having worked in venture-backed startups in Silicon Valley and Boston, understanding that relationships with people is the foundation. And so in the work that I've done, and one of my team members is actually in the webinar today, Blaise Amani, who's joining from Global Innovation Valley, who has really educated me on the priorities. And so I would say, while connectivity is a priority for some, for others, it's electricity for the community so that children can read, so that some of the programs that the Global North views as important, like starting schools or libraries or providing the online training, can actually be delivered. So for me, it begins at the individual level, and that's really what I've focused on for the last probably 18 months now, meeting folks like Blaise, Seth Magania of the Discover, and just listening. But I think trust is critical. And then with that knowledge, being a bridge, given the experience and the access that I have, is bring it to the Global North to communicate the opportunity and present it as an investment opportunity rather than a need. Increase the agency and reduce the sense of dependency so that the next generation grows up with the idea that they can innovate and deliver their own solutions that are most appropriate for their community. So I would, I'd say there's a lot tied up in the word trust, but I think there's no shortcuts there. And so I've been working hand in hand with individuals to understand the needs. And then I'm really have the privilege of being a messenger, both to private capital in Nairobi initially. There are interested people there, whether it's CSR funding, and then also hopefully people who view the investment model as maybe an alternative or new pathway to build the innovation culture on the continent. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And when you talk about relationships, that's one thing that I've really found, and it's something that maybe we can use as a reflection, because one of the things that has been guiding to us is always prioritizing relationships over results. Because so many times I do feel like, especially within this sector, is that donors have really been prioritizing on results. And if, like, let's say a local community does not, or a local organization does not meet the donor metrics, there are always repercussions in terms of like financing that happens. And yesterday I attended a really interesting conversation, and this is based on a question or a comment that Sylvia Brown has stated. She said, private philanthropy represents only 8% of international assistance, and giants like Gates Foundations make up the lion's share of these. But all the Shift the Power Decolonizing Philanthropy, etc. initiatives are focusing on the tiny slice of the sector. ODA, multilaterals, etc. make up 21%. Who is working to reform the EU, the UN, USAID, etc.? I love that question so much. And one of the key things that we talked about in the conversation I'm talking about is we were asking ourselves, even as we talk about localization, decolonization, shift the power, are we bringing in people to the table, or are we creating new tables? I think it's something we need to think about, especially, do we need new tables, especially for these communities, or to reform the sector, or do we need new tables? I'm going to have my colleague run the second poll question for our participants. And
Vinny, do you mind if I jump in to answer Sylvia's question also? I'm on the board CDA Learning Collaborative Projects, and we are a learning partner with USAID with the Global Fragility Act to look and to strengthen their way of listening, shifting power, looking at local organizations that are working within their chosen countries. So in terms of trying to work with the UN and other sectors and governments in the EU, if you Google CDA Learning Collaborative Projects, you will find some of our work there, or feel free to reach out to me after and I can put you in touch with some of the work we're doing there.
Yeah, thank you. So as we are answering, as we're working on that poll, I'd like us to move on to continue with our conversation. And John, I think for the time I've known you, I've seen you in different platforms where you've represented your organization. And one of the things that I'd like to know, especially because one of the things we've also been having conversations about is this is something I've also been thinking about, how can the sector be also mindful about local organizations and their participation in such conversations, because there are certain barriers that already exist, especially like, let's say, for instance, if you host a conference in a country where there requires, like, let's say, there are visa restrictions, because again, that's another issue that communities do face, because for a long time, I've also seen, like, even academia, like, if you want to participate at a conference, let's say it's in the global north, there's that restriction when it comes to like visa, because we do have to attend interviews, we have to pay these huge amount for visa fees, which is also quite a huge, And so, John, what do you think are the collaborative opportunities between donors and local leaders like you? And how do you think, especially for local leaders who are attending our event today, how can they maximize opportunities to scale their model?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yes, we've been in many platforms that in one or the other, some have been smooth, some have been painful, and it's all in the name of supporting the communities that we serve. And one of the things that at Twende we believe in is, and it's in fact one of our core values, is co-creation. The fact that you have two different sides and there's something amazing that you'd like to roll out. Perhaps it's a new program, it's a new approach, something that's new. I strongly believe in co-creation, because that's the only way lasting change happens. And that's the only way also everyone can own the solution to the challenges that are there. So when it comes to relationships or how to address this challenge, I believe is to have conversations that really matter, conversations that will not be mostly to see what will I get from this, but conversations to see how can I make this better. For instance, you are starting out a program that will benefit people in a certain community, especially on entrepreneurship. You might have a really good idea. The idea has worked out very well somewhere else. Let's say it has worked out very well in Cairo, Egypt, and you want to roll it out in Arusha, Tanzania. It might have had 100% success over there, but it might not necessarily the case somewhere else. So getting to a point where you are willing to learn, both now this is from the giver and the receiver, is very crucial. And after that, having these conversations, learning, different sessions where you guys will actually see, oh, this now will work for both of us, is when you can now delve into co-creation in ways that you think this might be sustainable. Because anyone taking part in any form of, could be agreement, partnership, collaboration, there should be full ownership. You don't just give someone something, hey, this will work for you. It might not even work, and it might not even go that far. So I believe having candid conversations that are there to build trust, to build relationships. This is one way on how you can make, you can bridge this gap and make also people have full ownership of not just the problem, but also the solution. So that's what I think for now.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And one of the things I've also seen is, like, as we emphasize on co-creation, it's also important for like peer learning, offering that kind of platform. And we've really emphasized that with the work that we do at Mama Hope, whereby we do have a learning and solidarity network where we are able to have our partners co-create and replicate successful models within their organizations, as well as learn from each other. Because I feel like when it's better like when you learn from your peers. And Bridget says, yes, co-creation is the way to go, John. Deep conversation with community people, and this conversation should not be rushed. Just, yes, as I said, relationships over results. And the other thing also, we've also really realized is depth over breadth in terms of impact. And so moving on to Karen, what do you think development partners, both philanthropic and implementing partners, adapt including funding frameworks that center strategic investments in grassroots communities?
I think within the philanthropy world, the focus, like giving unrestricted, like trust-based philanthropy, meaning trusting that the organization you're trying to invest in or serve, trust when they tell you what they need to learn and what they need to use the money for. So unrestricted funding, amplifying their message and building connections like the peer-to-peer learning you're talking about, or if an organization is trying to learn how to build their infrastructure of their human resources, and that's not part of their grant giving, but they're trying to expand, giving supplemental funds to that to understand that this is part of what's going to help with their growth trajectory. And then the investment in all of the capacity strengthening, not building or not sharing from a Western perspective, but just understanding, serving the staff, their passion may be conflict resolution or inclusive dialogue processes, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to learn more about finance or accounting or, the world of spreadsheets and investments. So understanding that even what they're passionate about and what they're best at, they still need to be always gaining and learning for not just this job and this task at hand, but also for the investment in them as people. So truly listening to what the people are saying to you, and not just assuming that you know the right answers or the right way to grow or the right way to learn, or even what their work week should be like. And so true listening, shifting the power, as we talked about, unrestricted money, and also recognizing that especially in the past few years with the decrease in overhead that many, not just philanthropic organizations, but governments, they keep decreasing the amount of overhead. So something like what you talked about, where an invitation to travel, is coming out of, an imaginary fund. So they may be invited to speak at Geneva Peace Week, but they're in Tanzania and they need to pay for the visa, they need the travel, they need to pay lodging when they get there, and that's cost prohibitive. But it's not, the slush fund idea. So the one-offs of, having the philanthropies or investors being able to, like, having the relationship with the organization so they can come back and ask for short-term resources, I think would also be really critical.
Yeah, thank you. I really love those points. And there's a question we have from Dixoni Emmanuel. And I don't know, John, whether you are able to answer these. Strategic partners are cornerstone of grassroots organizations. There are gaps between giant NGOs and grassroots NGOs. Both are competing for resources.
Thank you so much. That both are competing for resources. I didn't get the last part well.
Yes, both are competing for resources. That's where the point ends at.
Okay, thank you so much, Dixoni. That's a really good insight, especially when it comes to. Let me also use the word strategy, because most people have used it in their own ways. And when we talk about strategy, let's say organization A has their strategy and organization B has their strategy. And you might call this a strategic partnership, a strategic relationship. And there are times that might not be the case. There's a time one, the needs of the other are very more important in the partnership than the other. I might be vague on that. But what I mean here is, you'd find that maybe the intentions are, from the back of someone's mind, even if it's a partnership, the intentions are not purely intentional for what that partnership is all about. You might call it a strategic relationship, but it's either what you said, they're giants eating over the small ones. And that's how it is, unfortunately. When it comes to also being able to I mean, the fight for resources, what I think is that, yes, that's there, because the more someone is giving and also the more someone is receiving, there's a way that it's a continuous pattern that could be either influencing business or it could influence benefits. Someone could be benefiting out of it. Someone can't do something all over without their own benefit. So it might be in a position that I believe that resources might, in one way or the other, be in competition. So you find even the ones who you perceive have the bigger resources, have a bigger platform, still perhaps the partner is the resource and they're competing over that. So there are times it's quite unfair, and it's really for the most part, I've seen that, but I see there's that shift. These days, there's a shift on how philanthropy operates, on how solutions are also arrived to. So I see there's that shift, and I see there's a genuine interest amongst many other partners that to be honest, I've been fortunate to interact with, and there's no hidden agenda. You see, everything is wide open, that this is how I would want to support you. This is how it's also going to be beneficial for us. So there's that sweet spot that most partners might not find, and they call it strategic partnership, but to me that doesn't work very well. And I really appreciate the ones that are there for pure intentions. Thank you so much, Dixoni, for sharing that.
Tom, do you want to add something?
Yes, thanks, Vinny. And sorry I dropped out there. Even here in the US, we have internet problems at times, so sorry, apologies. There was a question earlier about what the relative imbalance, if you will, between, say, you and resources, USAID, that investment. The whole point of impact investing in private philanthropy is to be the innovators and the early adopters to validate a new market solution. I think that's how you will mobilize it. I think to try and go in and change without evidence of sustained, really effective impact, not just at the NGO level, not just at the project level, which can often be ambiguous at best and skewed at worst. No one's ever going to tell their benefactor that things aren't going well if you're dependent. And part of the reason we need to get away from that dependency mindset is that you can't be your true self as an innovator or representative of your community if you can't speak freely. So I would say it's important that the private sector pursue innovation, either through a nonprofit channel or through impact investing, which is engaging the private sector in more of a conventional investment model, as a way to demonstrate not only the potential that can be unlocked, both to other private capital, to the country, to the county, to the community where these entrepreneurs or SMEs are working, but also as a signal to the large organizations who are moving billions of dollars every year to see opportunity, and that you can move that. And I've had conversations with the innovation people and at UNHCR, and I think as many layers as John alluded to, it works both ways. They cannot see the picture as clearly because there are so many steps between them and the grassroots operation. So I think for myself, it's gathering evidence and then creating a platform, which Blaze is part of. It's called the Refugee Changemakers Africa Network, to create a platform where the voice of those entrepreneurs, those young people, those innovators can strategize and really convene with the larger players in a more effective manner than one-offs. And so that perceived maybe competition for limited resources or for one NGO's grant making is mitigated by the fact that we're looking for systemic change. And I think it will take time, but it requires sustained effort. And so I would encourage people not to abandon the large NGOs like UNHCR. They're completely strapped, and particularly now, given we have two humanitarian crises There are many others, but two that dominate sort of the headlines right now. Others that have been going on, say, in Sudan for years and are largely off the headlines at the moment. But I do feel like it's important for the people that have the private capital to either give it philanthropically or through investment in order to show evidence that there is an investment case. And that's exactly how I'm approaching the business sector in Nairobi, is saying, no, this is a workforce that can be mobilized, and this is why it makes sense to invest. So just wanted to tag on to John's comments. Thank you.
Actually, Tom, that was really so much related to the question that I was to ask you next. Yeah. But thank you for answering that. Because one of the other things, and I also want to add in a point to what John said, and also in line with what Dixoni asked. Part of the reason we've also realized is that we've also seen that donors so much, they trust organizations more that have systems in place. And one of the things that we decided at Mama Hope is to start a program called the Localization Development Accelerator Program, because one of the things we realized is that donors might be talking about the localization agenda, but there are still certain criteria that they are looking for. Like, for instance, you have to have a budget that is above 100,000, you need to have these things in place. But then who is going to invest in organizations that have a budget of 50,000 annual, And for us at Mama Hope, I keep on looking or thinking of how some of our partners, we started working with them when they had a budget of as little. We have one partner in Uganda who we started working with, and they had a budget of as little as $1,000. And over the years, we've worked with them, and they've grown into being one of the biggest maternal health care organization in their region. They've grown their budget into they are currently at 300,000 annual budget. And based on one of our criterion of impact that we're looking at how are organizations able to rely, to become self-reliant in a way that they only rely on local resources in running operational and overhead costs. And for this organization, back in 2018, they were able to hit 100% sustainability. And so it's something I'd like to urge donors to really have an open mind when they're working with locally led organizations, because we've seen that, especially when they are trusted with resources, they're going to channel them into where priorities are. And where these priorities are the ones that steer the organizations forward, not really the donor agenda, if I might say, but really the community and where the needs lie. But there, as we come to the end of our questions, I'd like Tom to give us his perspectives on there are certain challenges also for donors and investors when they are investing or donating to locally led organizations or investing in social entrepreneurs. So what are some of these challenges? And from your perspective, how do you think donors can work in curbing these challenges?
Thanks, Vinny. I'm smiling because it ranges from the very small, as I think Karen and John alluded to, the notion of just transferring funds from US to Kenya or Uganda, which is where my network is currently, the teams I'm working with are based, is straightforward, but it takes a while to figure that out. But one of the advantages of mobile phones is that those transfers happen in less than 30 minutes now from a US bank. I'm not doing this through an NGO or a 501c3 if you're in the US, because the scale of investment is the catalyst, the match that it takes to light a meaningful fire in Africa is relatively, for $500 US, you can make a difference and you can get a business started that then has a sustainability model. Have a program in Kampala, in one of the informal settlements, a woman is selling fish, and her business is strictly buying at wholesale, then putting up a stand and then selling at retail. And so in each transaction, all she needed was the funds to acquire the first batch of, her fish stock to bring to market. But at the other end of the scale, the challenges are really education, I would say, and awareness. The global North, I think, has somewhere between a romantic and a out of sight, out of mind perspective on opportunities in the global South. And so I would encourage everyone who hasn't had a chance to experience it firsthand to visit, not as a tourist, but as seeking opportunities to really connect with their organizations, like Mama Hope's organizations, those that John is working with, those that African Visionary Fund is working with, and so many others. And through that shared communication, one has a better understanding. To do it at scale, though, requires advocacy, and it's folks like the people on this call, the efforts of need in terms of creating a community of like-minded, innovative thinkers, philanthropists, to discuss these and create awareness. But it's organic, and I think it requires sustained effort. But I would say it's largely lack of awareness. And it could also exist on the continent. I think there could be greater investment of Africans in African enterprise and the innovation culture. But I think it's encouraging because we're having these dialogues about systems change. And 10 years ago, everybody was talking about monitoring and evaluation, that global North metrics would drive investment. And now we're talking about changing the power to those who have the best knowledge of the need, the priorities, and the opportunities of their immediate community. So I'm encouraged, but the work is just beginning, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And I'd like us to do the last poll question that Wambui has, my colleague has set up for us. Maybe Wambui, you can run that. And we'd like now to, as Wambui is working on that, we'd like to open up for questions. If you do have any questions for our panelists, we really want. I know we kept on answer. We were answering as we moved on with our conversation. But we'd like to, if you have any other questions that you'd like answered, you can do that right now. And I think so the question was, what do you think can better support the acceleration of impact? Tech-driven solutions, collaborative partnerships, innovative funding models, locally led leadership. 83% of you voted for locally led leadership. Yeah. So I don't see, let me see. I don't see any questions. But as we wait for that, maybe our panelists can share with us some of the action points that each one and every one of us is going to should think about as we move on with our conversation. So I think, John, do you want to start us off?
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. And I am not surprised that locally led leadership has been has had, it's all the majority's interest. Because for me, I always believe in that proximity solutions are correlated. So not so far. In Swahili, there's a saying that fimbo ya mbali haiui nyoka. That means a shaft, stick that's very far cannot kill the snake. Something that's immediate, something that's closer has an impact. And that's what I strongly believe in. And perhaps I've butchered that saying in Swahili or maybe in English, but that's what it means. That's what it means. And my goal here is that as much as this is going in terms of proximity, in terms of locally led solutions, I also would like to, because this is something that I challenge myself every time, and this time around, I've seen that it's something that we can also improve on, is the sustainability of the solutions. Until when should we reach a point where we say, oh, now we have enough support for us to sustain our solutions. As much as we're building capacity for locally led solutions, local leaders, as much as we are opening up the world to communities that were unseen and heard, how are we building them? I would give an example of the people that we serve. In the end, would like them to be thriving entrepreneurs, but who again will invest? They'll still be in that same channel that most of us, the local leaders, have gone through to get the funding to support them. They might as well need that same funding when it comes to investment. So as we are building capacity for the future, I think it's also high time to see where we want this to go, because we want to sustain giving, not just investing, even giving, local giving. And this for solutions themselves. There are times it might be a new topic to most people, but also investors. We need the investors of the same solutions to come from the same communities, but how are we building that capacity for them? Let's say we're talking about someone who is investing in a team, in a community of farmers who are, perhaps it's a network of farmers, and what they're supporting them is beekeeping and honey. Who will invest in that honey? So we also need to see that when it comes to building capacity for local leaders, let's also aim to see all these other aspects that we could also build support on. That is, enhance the ability of the locals to give, because I don't think that resources is a challenge. Having limited resources is a reason for you not to give. So that's one thing. The other thing is also when it comes to solutions, I'd like for us to think long term. Until when will this be enough? So this is also a challenging question to both givers, receivers, donors, and doers, to see the sustainability, the end goal, because giving and receiving might not be the solution forward. It has to be through relationships, it has to be through partnerships, it has to be through trust, it has to be building capacity for the local solutions and all of this. So it's a challenge to everyone to start thinking about that. We are building this generation now. People have come up with the solutions. Perhaps someone wanted to have a really good system to help people with maternal health challenges. Now they have this. Perhaps it's something that's scalable, something that's investable. How are we building that capacity for them to be invested upon, but also for other people who are just similar to them or closer to them to be good investors? So those are the challenges that we also face. We might solve one, but the other one might come sooner or later. And I'd like for us to start thinking on how we can solve both. Thank you, Vinny. I have many things to share. Perhaps I'll hear from the rest for now.
No, that was great. And I love what you said, sustainability of the solutions, because I do feel like one of the things we've really done and what we've really been having in the sector is like talking and coming up with solutions, but then how are we able to like maintain, or like how are we able to have them impact the sector or like the communities in the long run? Karen, do you have what are some of your parting shots?
I think when I think about this in two different ways. I think about the systems change, like the conversations that can take place there, and then also about the curiosity and the work that needs to be done for people who do have the privilege to be in the point of investing or working in these sectors. So I think back to trust and having the conversations with local organizations and being willing to invest in them, even when there's not the a strategic plan or a transition plan or a CFO or an active, Western-based board of directors. So if you see or introduce or someone because of their travels or because of their work experience or because of a platform, even like Global Giving or something, where you see a small organization that you believe in their mission and being willing to do the work to have the conversations with their leadership and find out what they're striving to do and take the time to the investment of time to have those conversations, I think is critically important. I think the platforms like organizations like Mama Hope, who are willing to take smaller organizations and give them the capacity, like the lessons and the capacity and the strength to navigate to become a larger organization, are critical. And other platforms where there's conversations and dialogue about what people have seen or heard of, or what solutions are coming out of smaller organizations in areas where geographically might be challenging to get to. So I think that's one active thing that we all can be doing, and people who are on this call, and also looking at the systems, thinking about locally led transitions, shifting of power. I mean, as I said before, with CDA, with the board that I'm on, I mean, there's a whole body of research and solutions and tools that are available to help organizations that either have this co-leadership model or are interested in finding smaller nonprofits or not even nonprofits, organizations to do the work because they know that they have the ideas and the resources from somewhere else and they want to invest. So looking at the systems thinking that is happening around these topics and being willing to participate in the distribution and the amplification of what those lessons are and what those tools are, and get those resources out to people, because the investment in like the human capital of all of the people who work in this sector, and to the people also who are the beneficiaries or have a benefit of the work is an important investment to make. So I think systems thinking and also curiosity and sharing and dialogue.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I've been seeing different organizations, especially within the sector, that are foundations, for instance, or that are in the philanthropic space. They've been developing tools to have donors or people who'd like to give learn, which I think is really important, because I think in any form of work, allyship is really important. And that's something, it needs to come from like those ones with resources to influence their peers. Because again, I don't feel like locally led organizations would have, but then for an organization that is from the global north, has seen the impact that communities have or has been in this space, is able to influence their peers and advocate for the work of locally led organizations. So that's something great that is happening, and it's important to acknowledge that. And Tom, what are some of your parting shots?
Parting shots would be that if anyone wants to get involved, simply put it up in your LinkedIn profile. Pretty much everyone that I've met in my network, both young women leaders and men leaders in the continent, they're eager, they're open, they're inviting the conversation, and they are hungry and eager to learn. So I think if all one can do, if you're not able to support it financially, is sharing your experience, having a dialogue, and just beginning to build those communication bridges goes a long way. I would say that it's also important to have not only individual projects, but also building out the ecosystem, whether it's technology, infrastructure, electricity, internet connectivity. The innovation economy is only available to those that can connect to it. And I think the false promise is that because we appreciate it, say in North America or Europe, developed parts of the world that have more advanced infrastructure and technology, assume that access is there. It is not there. The flip side, I think, in complement, I think creating awareness within the governments, both local and national, across the continent. You know, how can we give evidence to ADB, African Development Bank, for instance, why they could advocate for greater investment by the private sector, why multinationals can come to a country and not dedicate some of their CSR budget, not just to things that are brand building, you know, sponsoring sports events or anything like that, but also creating truly meaningful community building. But I think it's a combination of building out that ecosystem of partnerships across all the gaps that exist, as well as investing in individual projects that highlight the potential and the success and the promise that resides there, that everyone on this call and everyone interested in changing the world to be a better place for all can, there's plenty of space for everyone, so don't feel like there's only one way in. I guess that's my parting shot. Join the movement.
Yeah.
And I think what Tom said also, that the invitation about allyship or lending skills is that you don't have to be a philanthropist by definition. You don't have to work in the humanitarian sector full time. If you have legal skills, finance skills, communication, strategy, that there are organizations that need you and want you. And so it's like expanding the pie and creating more opportunities for people to understand that it doesn't have to be full time. If they have 10 hours a month, they have 5 hours a week, whatever the case might be, that there's a place for them in their organizations where they can contribute and do great things. So just to expand the pie of all the other participants who could be joining us.
Yeah, those are really great points. I like join the movement because I think what we have at the moment is a movement really. And there's a poll question that is going on, so kindly take some time and fill it out. And before we end, because I'd like us to come to an end, I'd like John, how will the participants here, how can they interact with your work? Where can they learn more about your work or reach out to you?
Thank you so much. As much as it's different from many other people, I'm findable. And Twende is also fundable. We are findable and fundable. So you can visit us on our website, twende.or.tz, but we're very much open in many other platforms. We are on LinkedIn. Personally, you can find me, John Rexford Nzira. There's also Twende. We have a Twende page there where we have more opportunities for people and more opportunities to partner with Twende in many other aspects through programs that we run, co-creation, workshops that we have. We also have many other platforms, many other ways in which we could collaborate. So please reach out to Twende. I'm also happy to share my email address, which is also accessible. I can type it there in the chat box, but if not, it could be shared. And with that, I would like to also quickly share a little bit more about Twende in a nutshell. And what we do is empower people, especially grassroots, both age-wise and stage-wise, to become better, successful entrepreneurs through a pipeline. We start with learners and we empower them to become makers, from makers to innovators, from innovators to successful entrepreneurs. We do that in a number of ways, and I'm happy to share this. I can talk about Twende from now until tomorrow. So you guys, if you don't stop me, I could just start sharing about that. But please find ways you can work with us. And we work with students and makers. And our aim is to find those people who are hard to find, hard to reach, and we work with them. Even there are others who are diamonds in the rough with the skill sets, with the approach, with the solutions. These are the people that we work. These are the people that you might not see any other place in the landscape, but we also amplify their work. We also showcase what they've done to the world, and they're doing a really great job. We have people who have made solutions that help communities in a number of ways. Could be in food processing, agriculture, and could be also in clean energy in itself, many other ways. So that's it about Twende. Thank you so much, Vinny. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And for us at Mama Hope, we'd like to thank you. And for anyone, if it's your first time also interacting with us, you can find us on Instagram, Mama Hope, Twitter, which is X nowadays, LinkedIn, Facebook, and also our website, www.mamahope.org, which I think my colleague Wambo will also be pinning on on the chat box. And I'd also like to thank our panelists for showing up today and for the great conversations that we've had. Thank you for your time, and I want to wish everyone a great day and night for us in East Africa. And yeah, until next time, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.